Hi, everybody. It's Book of Katherine, and today we're going to be talking about the end of the world and what it actually looks like on the Yahweh calendar, which is actually different than the Jewish calendar, and I'm going to go over that with you. So we're going to be leading up to this calendar. This is the calendar of March, and hopefully in just a little bit you'll understand what that means. It may look complicated now, but it isn't. I'm just going to break it down for you nice and slow. So all right, so everybody hears about the end of the world all the time, right? But the truth is that you may or may not know this very famous verse that Jesus of Nazareth says about the end of the world. He says, "The exact day and hour no one knows, not even heaven's angels, nor even his Son. Only the Father knows." So keep that in mind as we do this. I am aware of this verse, but it says the exact day and hour, no one knows that. And so what today is going to be doing is going to be looking at I'm not going to be saying anything, I'm not going to say anything about the exact hour and the exact day, but how we know that this is the time. And of course, it also know that in that it says, after he says that the exact hour and day, we're told a little bit more right here. It says, the arrival of the Son of Man will take place in times like Noah's. Before the great flood, everyone was carrying on as usual, having a good time right up until the day Noah boarded the ark. They knew nothing until the flood hit and swept everything away. And maybe you're thinking, hey, that's not right now. We know stuff is happening. We are aware. We are aware that, here we go. We are aware that, hey, there are a lot of earthquakes today. We're aware. Look at this. How many earthquakes are going on today? Why does it keep twisting on me? I'm not trying to do that. So we're aware that there's a huge amount of earthquakes going on today. Like this is down in New Zealand. This is up here in Alaska. There seems to be this huge new equator that's being drawn along here, kind of busting up the earth, in half. Look at how it just goes all the way around. And you're like, well, I know that there's an insane amount of earthquakes. I know. I watch all the channels about that. I know that the volcanoes are going crazy. It seems like something's insane about the volcanoes. They won't stop erupting, whether it's in Italy or actually this is Mount St. Helens, but this is exactly what all the volcanoes look like, from Cinnabung to Tal to, oh my gosh, yes sir. There's just numerous we're learning we're getting to know how volcanoes erupt and how different every eruption can look. Kilauea is just a bunch of flowing lava. And so we're starting to get to know that, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on. But the reality is that most people aren't reporting on it. Those of us that are watching the earth are not the majority of the world. The majority of the world is right here. They are carrying on as usual, having a good time. They're still buying online. The great COVID hit, and people are still ordering on Amazon. They're still having dinner at their houses. They're still having dinner parties. They still have life like normal. Most people will be hit off guard. Despite COVID, people are in a lot of ways carrying on. All right, so we do know that it'll be like that. And so I think that's why that only adds to my argument that that's this March, that it's going to be happening on this calendar. And I'm going to go over why I think it's going to be within this week, the 14th of March through the 21st of March. I think it's going to be somewhere in there, and I'm going to go over with you why that is. So the first thing to go over is that you would think that we would learn the very first thing we need to go over is Jubilees. So we know from reading the external documents that the Lord, and even Genesis, that the Lord made a covenant with Adam for 7 days, that he would remake the earth in 7 days. Enoch talks about remaking the earth, a new creation that's done. And we know about Exodus. If you follow me on my Twitter feed, all of this is on there, and you can learn about the 7,000 years. So we know from Thutmose II, when he had boils all over his body, all the mummies have boils all over their bodies. Even Hatshepsut, the great Egyptian pharaoh that was a woman. Even she had signs of boils all over her bodies from reigning at the time of being Pharaoh's wife during this time of Thutmose II. So this is when it all goes down. That's where all the scientific evidence shows. And so you take 70 jubilees from that and you land right here in 2021. But how do we know exactly when, and why do I think it's March? Well, I'll tell you why that is. Because we know that COVID started in March of last year, didn't it? So there's a reason for that. So COVID, in my belief, is that that was the beginning of the final year of Jubilee. That's the final 7,000th year. So, and what do I mean by Jubilee? So the way that Babylon counted their days is this thing of a decade. Decade is 10 years, a century is 100 years. And the Hebrews didn't count that way. In fact, if you read through, where is it? So if you read this yellow right here, God said to Moses and Aaron while still in Egypt, this month is to be the first month of the year for you. And you may be thinking, okay, that's January. Is that January? But then you read on to the green, address the whole community of Israel, tell them that on the 10th of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family and one lamb for the house. And you read right on down to the blue, and it says, and then take some blood and smear it on the 2 doorposts. That's Passover. He's saying 10th of month, this beginning. Well, when is Passover? So he's saying that will be the first month is Passover. And you look up Passover and boom, it lands in March. So it turns out that there's this whole calendar actually written out. This is in Exodus. This right here, I should have said that. This, where he says this is the first month of the year. This is in Exodus 12. That's right here, the 12. It's right there in the main Bible. They didn't even censor this out. So, but this is reiterated in things like the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees, which was edited out by the Romans, that really details this whole calendar. It goes into a huge amount of detail. And the way they count their years is not the way the Babylonians did. Not the way the Babylonians did of this 10 years and 100 years. Instead, they counted in sets of 50. In sevens, 7 days for the Sabbath, and in 50s, 50 years for the Jubilees. And that's outlined in the Book of Jubilees, which I highly recommend you get. And it also goes into greater detail in the Book of Enoch, not just Exodus and not just Genesis and the Book of Numbers, where you can easily find those things about the calendar year. The Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees expands on what today's Bible goes into. These were just extra books taken out, in my belief, to remove this, because until the Romans removed these books, the early Christians, right up until 300 AD, the early Christians were talking about the 7,000 years. If you look up, the early Christians were all talking about 7,000 years. And then boom, in comes Constantine, who killed his wife by boiling her in water after his conversion, killed his own son. He comes in and he deletes all these books saying they'll give the people nightmares. Well, in reality, these things gave the people hope about what was to come and what was the pattern and what to be prepared for. And so here they are today. They are the people will be going on as usual. The great flood will be going on as usual and having a great time right up until Noah built the ark. Right? They're going to be going on having a great time, having no idea, because they edited out books like the Jubilees and books like Enoch. With them, you're able to very clearly outline, oh, wait a minute, March is when it starts. And not only that, but it's built around the lunar calendar, which God made, and also the solar year, which God made. Turns out that all the stuff from Wicca and witchcraft and the people from the Druids who study the moon, it turns out all of their calendars, all of their really, really complex calendars actually came from the Book of Enoch and those calendars that they have. So when you see the calendars with like super, super tight, like 1/7 and 1/7 and 1/7, Like these calendars of the people who study the lunar for Wicca or for Druidism or all these other kinds of religions, Buddhism and stuff, you'll see that they get into this Hellenism as well. They have a whole entire website just based on it. So like this I ended up using Luna F. It matters so much that their tight calendar of the moon and stars is tighter than anything we have. For example, I was trying to look up the new moon, the first light of the first new moon. And I was coming in here because that sets the month. It sets the month of March. It sets the month of the new year. It's based around the lunar calendar. And I go in here and I'm like, okay, so the 13th is the new moon. When's the second light? The second light's on the 14th. Because that's when it says that when it gets second most light is supposed to be the first day in the text. That's what it says. And then I go, was this the one that I was just on? Yeah, I go here and I'm looking at it and I'm going, wait, there's nothing on the 12th. There's nothing on the 13th. There's nothing on the 14th. The first light is the 15th. And I'm like, so the second light would be the 16th. That would put the first on this one. It says March 2021. On this calendar, the first day of the month would be on the 16th. But then I go back to this one. It also says March 2021. And I'm like, well, nope. Second light would be the 14th. And I'm like, so that's the first. Well, which one is it? Is it the 14th or the 15th? And the thing that saved my butt is going to this Luna calendar where they're so into the moon, they actually have these days. You can look up each day and see a picture of what the moon would look like from a telescope. That's how much they care. No other lunar calendar does it except for these people's sites because they care so much. And there's a $1 billion industry based on the moon for these types of things. I mean, that's what you see all the time. You see it all over. You see the UN woman doing it. They all wear the jade bracelets. The New Age in Sedona, Arizona is massive. And Druid, it is just such a huge industry. It's taken over the stone industry. People wear stones, not just for their birth year anymore. They wear it for the power they give them. And kids all over the world, especially America, are handing each other slips of paper with what incantation they can say. This is to get a good grade or to get their brother's hair to light on fire. Any number of things, to get more money, to have their parents shut up. Kids are calling all sorts of incantations down. And all of that money is based on these lunar calendars. And so this has given me the best one. And so I basically figured out that this is March 13th, no light. And where is it? I even looked up March 14th. I looked them all up. It looks like I didn't transfer them all. But basically, by March 15th, that was second light. So I know that March 15th is the first day of the year. So I have it marked out. There it is, the 15th. That's the first day of the new lunar, not just new, this is the 30th. So we're in March. This would be, starting on the 1st, this would be the month of Exodus, the first day of the year. Passover would be somewhere down here because you count in 10 days, 7, 8, 9, 10. So Passover would be on the 24th. And that totally brings in, this is exactly what I mean. You would think that I could just check with Israel. But look, 1, 2, 3, you saw, I counted the number of moons exactly right. And you could see already Israel doesn't, this is what Israel says. Israel says they start on the 14th. They just take the first light of the moon. They start on the 14th. So they don't even have that right. They don't have it right. And then even if you said that, okay, let's count 10 according to theirs. That would mean their Passover would be on the 23rd, right? Oh, no. That's not it. This is their Passover. Do you remember this? 2021, March 27th. What? If you count back 10 days to the 17th of March, right? Let's look on their calendar to the 17th of March. That's the fourth day. The fourth day of their month. My month would give them a better thing. My month starts on the 15th from what the moon actually says. That would be closer. It's still not 10 days. So why is it that they're doing that? Why is it that they're messing with it and putting Passover? Because that's a Friday. That's what Judaism, I'm noticing all the time, they do it because on the March calendar, that hits a Friday. If it started here on the 24th, or actually, if it actually was correct, it actually did what is actually written in the text of Exodus. First of all, if it was written in the text of Exodus, then number one, they would be having their celebration on the 1st because they're supposed to get a ton of testimonies about seeing the light, right? And it's like they would have to be on the 1st. And then if you count 10 days into that, that would be the 24th. But they don't. They move it back to the 26th, right? On their calendar, they're saying it's the 23rd on an incorrect date. They're saying it's the 23rd. Well, even then, if it landed there, on their calendar, it would land on the 23rd. If they said, oh, this is Nisan 1, if this is the first day of the month, well, then that would be the 23rd. And yet here they are at the 27th. So I've learned, to completely and totally disregard Israeli and Jewish calendars. And I should expect that because if you go to things like Jewish Boston, if you even look into it, Judaism has completely taken on the religion of Gaia. I mean, they worship Asherah. The hexagram is two triangles intertwined. You'll notice the hexagram is in faiths all over the world, very much predating the first temple. And this hexagram in all other cultures stands for the man and the woman. And every pagan religion says there was a man and woman that started the earth. And that hexagram is to represent that. In fact, every single table, every single Druid altar or Wiccan altar, any religion, any pagan altar has a female on one side and a male on the other side to give honor to the two male and female gods and goddesses. And here we go, Israel has a hexagram that is like all those things doing male and female. You can even look it up. There's etchings on their walls that say Yahweh and his Asherah. Actually, Asherah is the goddess that's totally hated by God more than, if you look up Asherah in the Bible, it's the female sex goddess that he rails against more than any other because she demands the death of babies. So, might explain the 400 million dead female babies in China. It didn't make sense to anyone why China would just mass murder children and why it had to be in the womb, why it had to be this way, why it had to be, if they were born, then they'd set them on the side of the road or stone them. And you're going, what that we live in this is after World War II. What are we doing that for? It's just insane. They have birth control, but no. Had to murder all those. It's very interesting. 400 million women dead. But that would be straight up the thing of Asherah. That's straight in the goddess of Asherah's type of thing. So anyway, I figured out, ditch Israel, forget Israel, look into the text. In the text, it says that it's not just that when you see the moon, notice when the moon, and if she rises, which means if the moon keeps getting brighter, then you know it's the new month. And so I had to look everywhere. Like I said, this calendar was saying, hey, the first light's on the 15th. This calendar for March 8th, it was saying, hey, this first light is on the 13th. I mean, they were going all over the place. So I finally had to get really down and dirty and get into it. And I finally found that the best place to go was to where people who worship the moon actually go, and they worship it so much that they break it down every day. And that's when I finally found it. This is what it'll look like on a telescope. Great. And so I found out 14th. Okay, that's a little bit. Now 15th, boom, we are in on it. See, I found them. So this is how the 13th, no light for sure. The 14th, a little bit of light. Now, does that light rise? Oh, yes, the light rises on the 15th. Now we have a new month. And now we know we're in the month of March. So we know that's that.
We know we're in the month of March, so we know we're right here. This month is to be the first year of the year. We know we're in the Passover month for sure because we do know Judaism hasn't strayed that far. They were at least in March. I just couldn't get the day right. And why am I trying to figure out the day so much? Why is it so important to me to find out, like, oh, what is every single day? Because we're talking about the end of the world here. I mean, because we have things like this happening, like where there's a new equator, then I'm like, look, we better get some kind of idea. This is too big. It's way too dramatic. When it goes out here like this, that means it's deep. So all of these that are sticking up like that, that's unusual. It means it's a very, very deep earthquake. That's not normal. That is not normal. It is not normal for the earth to have this many earthquakes in a short period of time. That's supposed to be the number of earthquakes for a year, maybe two. We are not. Since 2020, we've been going insane. Great example is Croatia. They started out 7 years ago with 38 earthquakes, then 40 earthquakes, and then 70 earthquakes, then 60 earthquakes, then 75 earthquakes, and then suddenly 2020 hits and they get 669 earthquakes. The end of this year, this year hits and it keeps going. It goes even up further. It goes 200 earthquakes a week. This is this year. Also, they call it in the text giving birth pangs to the end. They actually call it birth pangs. And that's why I post sometime on Twitter of these things that go, oh, there's a trend like this, and then this, and then this, and the earthquake gets bigger. And now we see them up. Like now we see the earthquakes going huge. Etna's getting faster and faster and faster with her eruptions. Kilauea is going further and further. It's very interesting to watch. And so that's why it like really matters that I look into all of these things and find out, studying the Enoch calendar, which gets very, very detailed. In Enoch, he says the Lord has a lunar year and a solar year. And so for a while, by the way, that's exactly what made me think that, everything's just going to finish up here on the 14th. Like we're going towards the 14th of March because I'm like, that's the end of the 7,000th year of Jubilee. If the first month is here, if the first month of the year is in March, at the end of March, then that means the last month of the year, the 12th month of the year, is earlier in March. And I'm like, well, when does that month end? And that will be the end of the 7,000th Jubilee that started last March and comes this March, and the end of the 70 Jubilees that started with the reign of King Thutmose II. So I looked into it, and I was like, boom, we're at the 14th. And then I learned about the solar year. I went and tried to confirm it with Enoch, and that's when I found the best researcher, a guy that's done so much research that he actually found what we found, but even more. He's like 2 years ahead of our research. If we had 2 more years, we would have found this stuff. He talks like me. He thinks like me. He's got all of these things. He's got amazing posts, and I'm kind of like, post more. I know he knows more, but when he's posting, it's so complicated. So he has broken down the Enoch year. He actually left California at the same time we left California and went on some big adventure that he's never stopped from. And I'm like, that sounds very familiar. That's why I say he thinks like me, because they've actually done similar patterns. Obviously, there are differences. Like they have kids. I'm not able to have kids. He's not sick. He's healthy. But you know what I mean? Like all these, it takes a risk to go take off an adventure in today's day and age. So anyway, this is what he did. He broke down the Enoch calendar, like the lunar and the solar year, and he found all this stuff. He detailed every single date in the 2021 calendar to the 2022 calendar. And what he said is look, we have in the solar calendar, this 364 day of Enoch calendar, it turns out Job cursed out a day. Anyway, it's a long thing, but basically says there are these 2 days right there at the spring equinox and the end of the spring equinox. There's 2 days that are not included in the calendar. Like the Enoch calendar doesn't have hours, it doesn't have minutes. That's all Babylonian and that's all Roman. So They do it completely different. They go solar and lunar, and what happens is these 2 days end up sticking out. And what I learned from that in the end is that this spring equinox, this is the end of a year, and this is the beginning of a year, and then we see the beginning of the whole new year. So there's this kind of end point and this beginning point, but they're not really part of a year. And that's what makes like the 365, those extra days make it all match, and you don't need to have like the pushing an hour forward, pushing an hour back, all that kind of stuff. The Enoch calendar works out perfectly when you do the days the way that they do them. It's very, very interesting. But in the end, I learned that the spring equinox is really powerful. In the text, he found that this spring equinox, these dates are when kings go to war. And there is a war talked about in Revelations 20, and Jesus, all the prophets talk about this war at the end. And it's very interesting that we're coming up to it. Here we are, March 2021, and we are heading into, and you're seeing everything increase on the earth. And it almost feels like there's a war coming. And then the first, that's, some people say it's part of, the 21st. Some people say it's part of the spring equinox. A lot of religions say the 19th, 20th, and the 21st are all part of the spring equinox, but they can't really nail it down. And part of that is because they're not using these prophets. Like, it was Enoch who said that every single day, the moon gets a seventh brighter. It grows by a seventh. Like, that's amazing thing to figure out, that everything on the zodiac works in sevenths. And that was Enoch who wrote that down, and how it all works. Even down to, I wonder if I still have it, like even down to, let's see here. Do I have it here? I know it's one of the things that I saved, but it's looking like they hide stuff just to save. I'm not seeing it. So he even talks about these things called the what do you call them? Gates. He talks about these gates. Yeah, like this for sure. Like, there's 1,800 volcanoes that are active today. I'm like, these are the volcanoes of the world, way more than they're actually reporting. Like, I mentioned a volcano. I was like, why aren't they reporting on yes, sir? And the next day, a big thing comes up on my phone. Yes, sir, exploding. And I'm like, so what, we have to ask for feedback on a volcano to find out? Meantime, they're looking at here, Norway and Yellowstone, two places with just kind of some earthquakes. I'm like, why don't you cover what's actually erupting? That would be nice for a change. I'm just like, nope, that's everything. So let me look really quick and see if I just have it and I never uploaded it. Well, sometimes I download and sometimes it goes into another folder. So as you can see, my pictures are not of my cats. They are all of, well, I just cleaned out my phone. I have so much research on my phone, it's not even funny. But anyway, he talks about these gateways. And it turns out, when you look into it, these gateways are actually very much so exactly the patterns across the sky that the sun and the moon actually travel. That's why we have the Tropic of Capricorn, the equator. That's why we have these 3 layers along. That's the lines that the sun actually travels and the moon travels. Those are the 3 gates. And he called it way before anyone else actually found it with a telescope or did anything like that. So it's absolutely fascinating. So anyway, when I looked into the solar calendar and I looked on this gentleman's calendar, you can find him at enochcalendar.com. It's kind of funny because he just said in one of his posts, spring equinox often brings suffering. The suffering begins. And I actually wrote on his thing and I was like, hasn't suffering begun for the last 3 years for people who are of your faith and of your religion? Conservative sweeps. I mean, and then the next year it got even worse. And then COVID, it's been suffering. March every year, like all the conservatives lost their funding, right? They lost their YouTube accounts. And then they did a second round, and another, like even more lost their YouTube accounts in the next year in 2019. And then 2020 came along, And then COVID hit. It's been so much suffering starting in the March. And I was like, yeah, suffering has begun. I think we're coming to the end of our suffering this year. And the fact that he's been focusing on the Enoch calendar while I've been focusing on what all the texts say about the end of the world, basically. I think we fell onto that's right. The first time we went into the Bible was looking at Revelations because it sounded like they had that's what happened. They shoved us off of everything else. They said you can't study anything else. They deleted all these blogs on like all these kind of forces in the world. And it was like, well, there's nowhere else to look. There's nowhere else to research while I'm sick in bed 24/7. How about this Bible thing? That'll piss him off. So I did. And that's how I found all this. I was like, huh, not exactly what I was looking for, but it certainly keeps me busy, that's for sure. So anyway, I looked into his solar calendar and what his date was. And I looked up what he said it would be for the year, this year, 2021, in March. And what it ended up being was right here. His solar calendar begins on the 21st. So it's just like I said. I found out that, hey, here's the spring equinox, the 19th and 20th, and then the new year starts on that's the solar new year. So when you match them up together, what you get is the lunar is in purple, right? And then the new lunar year, 2022, or 7001 in the Enoch calendar, or the Yahweh calendar, that's the new year in red, right? So, and then on the 21st, two things are going to happen. It'll be the 7th of the new lunar year, and it'll be the 1st of the solar year. And normally there's a gap. A lunar year and the solar year, normally there's a 10-day gap. And in this year only, in March 2021, there is exactly a 7-day gap. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, boom. So on the 7th day of the lunar year, the new lunar year, and on the 1st day of the new solar year, I mean, that's the first time. And then what do you get? And then it's the 21st of March. And if you guys have been following me for any length of time, you know that all the earthquakes are shoving us. The number 21 could not come up more. I cannot tell you how often the 21st has been focused on through all these earthquake days, like just chaotic thing, like earthquakes will happen chaotically all through the day. And there's a map that you look at, and the earthquakes happen all over the place, up and down, deep in the earth, all different sizes all over. And then on the 21st of January, boom, one at 12 noon. And then a bunch of little earthquakes along the side. One big one that was a 7.0 in the middle at 12 noon. And then boom, and they all went flat. So it was like flat into 12 noon and flat out. And I was like, so what's up with the 21st? Like, I looked at the rest of the month and it was all chaotic. And then when February came in, we looked at the 21st. And then it had the same pattern for the whole month. And now we're into March and I'm like, oh my gosh. And maybe it's for 2021, but there's just these 21s everywhere. And I'm like, oh, wow. On the third month, on the 21st day, 7 times 3, the Trinity times creation of the world. 7, the creation of the world is 7. The Holy Trinity is 3. 3 times 7, you get a conjunction of the 21st day of the third day of the month. On the Gregorian calendar, you get the 7th day for 7 days of creation. On the lunar calendar, and you get the first day for the solar calendar. And when you put all that together, that's my point. It could happen anytime in here. We don't know the day or the hour. I just think that it happens by this point. So whatever it says, we don't know the exact day and we don't know the exact hour. Part of me wonders is if he's saying that because we don't. Which calendar, if he said a day or hour, which calendar would it be? People are already beyond confused about when Jesus Christ died because there's 2 different versions in the 4 Gospels. Well, it turns out one, John is using the Roman calendar, And then the other two, I think Mark and Luke or something like that, or Mark and Matthew, they actually use the Hebrew calendar. And if you line those both up, they're off 3 hours. So it turns out they all say the exact same day and time, but it looks completely different. So you're right. Sometimes I think that phrase, we won't know the day or the hour, no one knows that, is simply because by the time this comes, which one will it be? Will it be the lunar day? Will it be the solar day? Will it be the Gregorian day? Which day and hour are you referring, people? No one knows that. And I think only the Father above, only the Lord above knows what calendar truly lies, and what day it will truly happen on. I do know that there is a tendency in the scriptures, or the text, the ancient text, I should say, and the Dead Sea Scrolls. There is a tendency that he'll be merciful and push it off as far as possible. But I also think there's something to that 7. I don't think it'll happen before the 30th, or I don't think it'll happen before the 1st at all. I don't think it'll happen before them. I do think it will happen at night, because there are so many parables about at the night cometh thief in the night. Bridegroom and brides and the bridegroom at night, like on and on about the nighttime. So I do think it's very possible that it may happen at night. Also, I should say, just at this time in this spring equinox, which I think is fascinating, this spring equinox, every single year, there is a meteor shower that all four corners of the globe can see. So I think that's very interesting. I think they come from the south. And it actually says the coming of man, when he's talking about this, when he's saying these things, and he says no one knows the exact hour, and he says everyone will be having a good time. One of the other things that he actually says is that when the Son of Man comes, which is, he never really said, I am the Son of God. I don't think. Maybe he just says others are correct when they say it. But basically, it also says that when the Son of Man comes, no one will miss it. All four corners will see it. I used to be like, how is that going to work? And it turns out that certain asteroids or certain meteor showers can be seen from all four corners of the Earth. And it turns out that, yes, the thing that happens at spring equinox is one of those. So it can be seen from all four corners of the Earth. So it just nails into me even more that it could be on these 3 days in the evening. I don't know when, but that's the best I can give you, the best I can say. That's the research that I've done. And that if I'm going to post this on Twitter, I probably already have posted it on Twitter. But this is the calendar I've worked really hard to figure out. Like I said, in purple, this is the lunar month. That's the 12th month of the 7,000th year. And in red, that's the first week. It's the lunar month of the 7,001st year. And then this is the solar calendar. That's when the first hits, is on the 21st. And they all come into conjunction. All three come into conjunction right here on the 21st. All these holy numbers, the 7th and the 1st and the 21st, 3 calendars. So 3 comes with a 7 again on the 21st in March, on the 3rd month, on 2021, which is really and truly the 7,000th year since the fall, fulfilling the promise. Oh, one last thing that's amazing about this. I said, I get the feeling that the Father is going to do something like this. Let me see if I can do this for you. Yeah, I probably can. So I have a feeling he's going to do, because he keeps pushing 21 at us. So 3 times 7, sorry, this is my FND, so I have very bad writing, but I used to not be able to write, so I used to not be able to hold a pen. Thank you for your support. My supporters, $1 a month. You got me to hold a pen and write this for you. So this is you, baby. This is you. So, in my opinion, there were 7 days of creation. And then there were 7 days, because 1,000 years is like a day according to the scriptures. 7 days of the first earth. And then in the end, there will be 7 days to honor, like basically to honor creation again, or to give mankind time to come to him. I don't know what's going to happen before that 7 days, but I have a feeling like it's going to be big. I think these days were millions of years. I think these days were 1,000 years. And I think these days were actual days. So that's my opinion from my research. That's what I think. But that makes 3 7s. That makes 3 7s. So that's another reason. Before I even knew that this would go for, before I even knew about the solar calendar at all, I said to everyone, I said, I wonder if there's going to be like an extra week on top. I said, I don't know if it's the 14th. I don't know if it's the 14th because he keeps pushing 21 everyone. So I said, well, the 21st is 7 days later. You can find on my Twitter feed. I was like, maybe there's an extra 7 days to like do that 3 sets of 7. Maybe he's going to do something like that, just to even out 3 times 7, 3 sets of 7. Maybe that's what 21 means, that he keeps pushing at it. That would put it to the 21st, to those 3 sets. And then after that, I found the solar calendar and it falling here that Enoch parts out. And I was like, oh, it's something. So I think there's so many things pointing at these dates. So I'm going to post this on my Twitter feed. It's probably already posted. I hope it really helps out. And I hope that you followed me on what I said through this whole presentation. I know it's going to be very long. I know there's a lot of detail. I know it's a lot of research and a lot of numbers flying your way. But hopefully, you understand that this March calendar was made by a pope sitting in Rome, updating a previous Roman emperor, making a calendar by their own design, nothing to do with what any of the text said. I hope you understand that the Israel is nowhere near the actual calendars. None of it is based on their Torah. None of it is based on their Talmud whatsoever. It's all based on what is convenient for them. That's why you hear that they're not religious Jews, they're cultural Jews. That is definitely the case. Even the Hasidic Jews, they do not have calendars based on the actual lunar cycle. Also, as I leave, one last thing about Judaism. Just understand, like, they even say their new year is in September. And they say that because Babylon celebrated their new year in September. I mean, they celebrate on Rosh Hashanah, and you know that Exodus is very clear. Sorry, the wrong one. Exodus is very clear. This month is to be the first month of the year for you. Passover, the day you take blood and smear it over the 2 doorposts. That's taking the blood over the doorposts so that the Lord would pass over them and not kill their child. If you didn't have the blood over the doorpost, then you would lose your firstborn male or something like that. And so that's what the Passover is, to honor the fact that the Lord passed them over when they put blood of a lamb over it. That's why you hear people refer to Jesus Christ as the blood of the lamb. His blood was the blood of the lamb because it takes the place of killing a lamb and putting the blood over, and God passes over judgment of you instead because you're covered by the blood of Christ. That's the whole thing. I mean, Jesus of Nazareth even died on Passover. He was buried on Passover, so the whole Passover feast is meant to overlap it. So, but the point is that we know the first year of the month is the Passover month. They even acknowledge that Passover month is in March, even if they move around the dates for their own thing. And yet, still, even so, they celebrate their new year in September, 7 months later. And that 7, I think that's very significant. 7 months later, I think is significant because when it talks in Revelations about the beast and the woman, on her forehead is stamped mystery. And I said way back in the very beginning when we first started studying the Bible at all, when we first started digging into these texts and learn way before we learned that the Bible number of books itself, 6 is totally wrong. There are 48 prophets out there. There's a ton of texts. Many of them have been burned. Many of them are under lock and key and road. Before we learned any of that, the evidence showed that perhaps mystery, Babylon, is Judaism and the Jewish tribes because they know everything that God is capable of. They celebrate being set free from exile. And yet, even so, they choose. They choose to keep their time different. They choose to have a Babylonian New Year, even though Babylon took them into captivity. They choose to have an incorrect start date, on the 14th instead of the 15th. And not only that, but this is the Israel calendar right here. They say this is the Gregorian calendar, but for the Israel calendar, they have Adar, 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 and then it switches. Nisan. Those are the name of months. They don't say the 12th month like scripture say or the prophet said. The first month, the second month, the third month. Right now, March is actually named after the god of wars of Mars. Mars is the god of war. That's probably why all the wealthy want to go to Mars instead of going to the moon. Because Mars, if you try to go to Mars, you're worshiping that god, worshiping the god of war, worshiping one of the Hellenistic gods. And but that's in the Bible. In the actual prophets, what the Lord says is he just says, name them the first, second, third, fourth, fifth months, and then the first, second, third, fourth, fifth days. Well, they don't. Israel named it like Babylon. Before they ever named anything March, Babylon named their months. And they named their months like Adar for their own gods, Nisan for their own gods. They had their own Babylonian gods. They're all the same gods, just different names, like every single, corrupt or criminal person out there. They all have these fallen angels and their Nephilim, all have numerous names. They're all the exact same god. That's why Greek god, they go, here's the god in Greek and in Rome. They didn't even come up with their own god system because it's all the same fallen angels, the same Nephilim. But the sad thing is that Judaism today names their months. They keep this kind of lunar calendar, right? But they keep it because that's what Babylon did. And they keep it with different days. They don't keep it according to the laws that were given to them. And they even name them the names that Babylon had. So it's so sad to see that the people taken into captivity, freed after Egypt, taken into captivity again, that those people are the only people on earth keeping Babylon alive, is Judaism. Judaism, the people, Babylon razed their temple, tore down the temple of Solomon, and today they use the names Adar and Nisan based off of Babylonian gods, based off of what the Babylons called their months of the year. And they still do it today after they were freed. Babylon really wasn't around. The first reign was 700 years. The next reign was 100 years. So these guys were captured. Israel was captured for 7 years within only 100 years of Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar being around. It was a really short empire. The Akkadians were way longer. And yet Judaism keeps Babylon alive. And therefore, that's why I think that's the woman mystery. Because the women practiced Gaia. They practice witchcraft like crazy, and they teach it to their kids, and they say it's what Yahweh wanted. And yet it doesn't say anything about that in the text besides kill those witches. Kill the women who say that they are of Yahweh, and yet they worship the goddess Asherah. Stamp them out. And they even say the women with their beaded bracelets. Yeah, it's a mystery why they would be saved from captivity, that they would enjoy Purim, that so much would be done, so many miracles done for them by the Lord God for them and them alone. And yet when the end comes, they keep none of it. We were looking through it and we were like, wow, Israel does it. Doesn't keep Israel doesn't keep the day. They don't have the day right. They don't have the month right. They name the month a different name, and they don't have the year right. Their year is 5,700 something based on the ancient Sumerian pagans, not based on Yahweh's calendar, which you can count and find out rather easily. It does take some time, but 7,000 years. Even their calendar of their years is incorrect. They have known God and they have chosen to live without God. And I also learned that brimstone is sulfur, and there's a lot of sulfur at volcanoes. So I'm not surprised fire and brimstone is coming. Well, interestingly enough, we're getting a lot of fire and brimstone with the volcanoes exploding everywhere. It's a big hint, but unfortunately, most of the world will never hear about it. The end will come and they will be having a good time, shocked by it. But not you and I. You and I will be expecting it sometime between March 14th and March 21st. Hope that helps you guys. I did my best. I love you so much. Please, for all my time and hard work, please donate just $1 below. That's all it takes, just one single dollar. And you'll help support my health care and you'll help support my cats. Thank you so much. It doesn't go to my husband. He doesn't get any. He probably should for helping me survive all this. But this really is for my health care and for my cats. And I love you guys so much for helping me be able to actually make this for you. We have an amazing partnership. Thank you so much. To stay up for the next one, because I have some more coming, hit subscribe. Make sure to hit subscribe. And then please go on over to my Twitter. I'm at Prophets Journal for my fiction feed, and then I'm at Book of Katherine for my everyday feed, where I tell you guys about stuff like this. Talk to you guys later. Bye.